Hello, I'm Joshua Shale. I am a fractional executive, a fractional COO with GSCE Strategic Consulting. And welcome to the fourth part of 4 on our conversations about accountability. Today, we're going to be talking about using accountability to delegate and elevate the people around us so that we can help to build our companies and get them ready to really scale. So in this conversation, we're going to go over a few different areas. The first is, before we get into the accountabilities and the measures and the numbers, we're going to talk a little bit about what are we really looking to do? Why is delegation and elevation? Why is bringing people up into the organization? Why is that so important? Why is it important for us as business leaders? Why is it important for those people, and why is it important for the business as a whole? The next step is we're going to talk about the characteristics of the right people, and the measures that we have, be it KPIs or OKRs, are going to be very helpful in helping us to determine what the characteristics are of the right people that we want to advance into through our organizations. And then some of the third section will really be about what are some of those measures, what do they look like, how do we use them? So I know that this is an interesting topic. I know that for a lot of business owners, for senior leadership, this is a really tough area to look at. And I hope that by the time we're done our conversation today, that we'll have peeled back the onion a little bit and really get to the heart of why we need to do this and what that really looks like and how we can use measures and numbers along the way of achieving this goal. So let's talk a little bit about the importance of elevating people throughout the ranks of our organization. The first thing that we need to think about is what happens if we don't do this? What happens if we decide to keep everybody just in the way they are, just in the roles that they have, just in the place that they are right now? So the first thing is, if we don't have people advancing and we don't have new people coming into the organization, can the organization grow? Can the business grow? Can we take on new customers in our existing markets? Can we introduce new products into new markets or services? Can we do those things, or are we really wanting to be in a steady state? And I don't know too many business owners that are really happy with just a steady state of everything being flat. So if we have desire to grow, even if it's modest growth, if we don't try to find people who are going to be able to be the next leaders in the organization, do we really have a chance at growing? So that's something really to think about. Is we can always think about, oh, what if I do this, and what happens when I do that and I try to advance people? But let's start with what happens if we don't do it. And I think that we can all see that that is not always a very rosy picture. So the next thing to really think about is this. The only thing which is absolute and guaranteed in our businesses is change. Things are going to change. Market conditions are going to change. The economy is going to change. The interest rate's going to change. The change is inevitable. It's going to happen. So as all of the changes are going to happen around our businesses and around our organizations, why not embrace that? And why not say, oh, look, I understand that changes are going to happen, but I am also going to bring change into my organization to take advantage of this. And a big part of that is, how do we find people who really understand our mission and can help us to advance it? And as we advance them up, in their careers, we can also take advantage of that. Remember, and we'll talk about it several more times, remember our discussions earlier about balancing out responsibility and authority. If we can give people more responsibility and we give them a little bit more authority, will that help us to grow our organization? Will that help us to get to new levels of revenue and profitability? If we do it right, it certainly will. The next thing to think about is for the business leader, the business owner themselves. And that's, what does that kind of change of advancing people throughout the organization, what does that mean for that business owner? What does that mean for that business leader? Well, it means a few things. One is, quite frankly, it can be uncomfortable. There's a lot of times where we see so clearly how the business should run or what that future of that business is. And in order to make that happen, Joshua Shale is asking me to bring other people up to help execute on that vision. When I see it so clearly, I'm naturally the best person to do the execution. But where does that lead? Where's the end scape for that? What's the end goal of that? Is that the business owner, that senior leader, works more and more and more, and takes on more and more responsibility and more authority? So really take a look at what's going to happen if you have people advancing in the organization, or if you decide not to let. What's that going to mean for you? It's okay. It's not selfish to take a look at what that is really going to mean, because as the business leaders, the business owner, how you go, so goes the business to a degree. And that's important to think about. Now that we've been introspective about ourselves, what does it mean for others? So what's it mean in your organization when we have people who are the unofficial leaders inside our organization, the people that other people look up to, but they know that they can't advance in their career, they can't advance in the company? What's that going to mean for them? Does that mean that we just want people who are satisfied with the status quo and are ready to embrace that and think that they'll be able to run that out for the rest of their career? Well, the best people are not comfortable with that concept. The best people are going to want to grow. They're going to want to advance, and they're going to want to take on more responsibility and have more authority. So what's it mean for others when we when we think about advancing our people and delegating and elevating our people? So I'm going to take a pause right now. And Ken, can you tell me any kinds of examples of where you clearly saw that there was ample opportunity to elevate people underneath the business leader, and when they were finally able to do that, how that benefited the whole company?
So, I mean, it always happens in companies, that I go into, where I think a lot of owners, and initially, and I think actually I'm missing the question a little bit, but a lot of owners actually don't do that. They believe that they have to do everything themselves, right? They believe that they do it better, and so they take that on, and they begin to build a leadership team that is kind of stunted for growth, right? So, and I think your question was examples where it has taken place. Is that correct?
Yeah, where they were. It's just examples where they were stuck up against it. They had hit that block.
Yeah.
And the key was, hey, I need to let go some and let other people take some.
Yeah. So a lot of times I'm having to teach that, right? And, question the owner, well, why are you doing this, right? Or why do you not trust? And, and help them understand how to lay out the right expectations and what done looks like and what success looks like. So a lot of times I'm having to teach that, right? So that the companies and the business owners can scale.
Yeah, it's interesting. Your point makes me think back to one of the topics we talked about earlier a couple of weeks ago, and that was, do we want things done, or do we want them done the way we would do them? And I think that's a really tough thing for business leaders, because they can so clearly see where things should be, right? And they can very clearly see how it should be done. And when they put somebody else, give them the responsibility and the authority to go and execute, and it's not being done exactly the way they think, it's so easy to say, you know what, put on the brakes, I'm going to step in, I'm going to take this over again. So it's really a thing to overcome. So we always need to think, do I want it done, or do I want it done the way I would do it? And that's a really honest question. And if the choice is, I want it done the way I would do it, we're really letting go of scale. We have to accept the fact that we're not going to be able to scale effectively if we do that.
Yeah, and if you
So
step in and begin to, you know, take control, right? It's going to disengage anybody that was driving the process to start, right? So you eventually you own the ball again. So
yeah, yeah. And another point, you brought the word process, and I see this very, very often, that in order for that business owner to begin to release a little bit, but yet have enough control, what they look to do is, you know what, I'm going to script a series of processes, and they're going to be absolute paint by numbers, and it's exactly how I would do it. And this can be a problem because, number one, any process that's a paint by numbers, whenever that edge case comes up, the process doesn't handle the edge case, people don't know what to do, and so they just sit down in the process. They just, I'm not moving forward. And the other is when we make it a paint by numbers, so we can do it the way I would have it done, we take away people's innovation. We take away their desire to think up of new ways, new angles, new solutions. And that's really what we want as business owners, is we want to have people who are independent enough and thoughtful enough to come up with a new, better way to do things. So I think I'm glad that you brought up process, because that's not always the panacea that we would hope it to be.
right.
So let's talk a little bit about some characteristics of what I'm going to call the right people, and that's the right people to advance through your organization. So the first thing is, talking about accountabilities, and we'll get into this a good bit more, but let your measures be part of the thing that helps you to identify them. So it's more than just, oh, this person fogs a mirror and is able to do the things that they're supposed to do. That's not always what we're after, but it's, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but really let the measures identify those people that you want to advance in your organization. When you give them a goal, their basic instinct is to surpass that goal consistently.
Yeah.
When you have some and you say, we need an output of 50, and they hit between 49 and 51, that's good. And they're probably very good for that role. But that person who says, you know what, 50 is great, but I can do 60, and then next week I'll do 65, that's a really good indication. To that point, another characteristic is not those who want to show up and meet the measure so that they can prove that they have done what they need to do. We want to look for people who own the measure. So what does that mean, to own the measure? It's that part of their personal brand, their personal identity, who they are inside the organization, is that they are the ones who are responsible and can be counted upon to hit that measure. They are the ones that are really consistent. They're the ones, quite frankly, who get upset when the measure isn't hit. And look for those types of characteristics. I'll give a really quick story. I was working with a company, and they had some inventory issues, and they had a person who we were doing the year-end inventory, and she had put a lot of work into it, wanted it to go, and we came back, and the audit, we got 85% was correct, and everybody thought, oh, that was good enough. And I spoke to her in the hall afterwards, and she was really angry. She said 15% was wrong. I'll have you know, as the coda to that story, she now runs inventory at that organization. And it's because she truly owned that measure. It meant a lot to her. Another is, do we see that people are hitting their measures, but we know that they have the capacity to do more? So one of my favorite ways to see people who have the capacity to do more is this. Are they invested in helping other people to make their measures? Do they have the time, the space, the bandwidth, the knowledge, the experience to be able to naturally go out and help other people hit their measures as well. And if they're doing that, they have the capacity to do it. And that's somebody that you really need to keep an eye on. And to that point, another piece is that the other people on their teams believe in them. Belief is a really powerful thing. When somebody really knows that person that they are working with can be depended upon, is going to hit the measures, is going to advance the department, advance the company, advance the industry. When they have that belief, that's a really powerful thing. So it's a lot of what we're looking at here. You can sort of encapsulate all these into what I call unofficial leaders. These are the people, they may not have the title, they may not have the salary, but they're the people that that others go to for advice, for help, for support. And if they can, if your measures can help to identify them, if they own the things they're responsible for, if they have the capacity to do more and other people are naturally going to them, that's a really powerful that's a really powerful set of indicators that you're looking at the right person to try to elevate throughout your organization. So again, let's pause. And Ken, do you have any sort of interesting stories or anecdotes about people that you've seen that have been advanced?
That have been advanced through their career?
Yeah, that align with these ideas that, hey, we identified this person. We see them as being somebody who has potential. We see these characteristics and we're able to advance them.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I mean, I've been that way through my career. Working in corporate America, being identified as a high performer. I mean, I can't think of clients right now, but you know, when
I did put you on the spot there.
yeah, that's fine. But when I was in a software company by the name of Oracle, the company, obviously, I was in this top 1% category, and they invested in us as far as training and things of that nature. There was another software company called BEA Systems. I went through their executive career track, and I was a bag carrying sales guy. I was the only non-manager to go through that, to just kind of groom me, you know, for my future and everything. So, but as far as others, you know, specific individuals with clients I've worked with, nothing that I can think of currently now.
So, you know, one of the things that I always come back to when I'm looking for unofficial leaders, sounds cliche, but here I'm going to go with it. And I think back to, you know, the U.S. military has been a big draw for management theory and concepts. And one of the things that makes the U.S. military, especially the U.S. Army, so non-commissioned officer class, the NCOs. Yes, we can have officers, lieutenant colonels and generals who are brilliant strategists and things like that, but it's that NCO class, those unofficial leaders that really drive the organizations. And so I'm not advocating that all business owners go watch Band of Brothers or something like that.
Right.
But if you happen to, go pay attention to the sergeants and the non-commissioned officers and how they're able to be those unofficial leaders that really drive those organizations, because that's what we're looking for when we're looking at the right people. All right, so this set of talks is about accountabilities and measures. So let's talk about two different types of measures. Go ahead.
There's one thing I noticed on that. If you go back that previous slide, like I didn't see anything tied to yeah, I like a core value fit within the organization, you know, and just right. So somebody can be this, but if my organization is family oriented or something like that, and we bring in an individual that's more aligned with win at all costs, you know, what sort of dynamics do you think that would present?
So that's a good question. I'm glad you bring it up. Those are much more of the qualitative measures, and that's a whole nother area.
Okay.
What I'm looking to do in here is just I'm threading that I'm between the goalposts here, because what I'm talking about on this slide are truly qualitative measures. But we're going to try to get a little bit more to the quantitative, but to get it back to the to the KPIs and measurables.
Okay.
But since you bring up the question, we'll tie it up in a little bit when we talk about using measures and reviews. Measures help with that quantitative. It's very measurable. It's analytical. It's you can run the numbers on it. You can get an average. You can do standard deviation. But in the review piece, we're also going to want to bring in that qualitative piece, and that is fit and finish, making sure that there is alignment. And that's definitely going to be something I'll talk a little bit more about that. But so often in organizations, we focus on the soft skills, we focus on the culture, and the as I use the term fit and finish.
Right.
That's sort of outside of what we're going to be talking about, because there are so many great resources to talk about the emotional intelligence and all of the other things that we want to have, so that we make sure that there's alignment. And we will touch on it a little bit, but I want to try to bring this to the numbers and how you can use the measures to help to identify the folks that are going to be there to increase, to elevate through your organization.
Okay.
With that being said, Ken, I couldn't agree with you more. If you bring in somebody who is qualitatively a bad fit, if you bring in somebody who is just, they're that hard charger, but they're the win at all costs, and ethics are for other guys, and we bring them into say a family business, that's going to be an issue. So numbers aren't be all end all, and there is absolutely room for emotional intelligence and for those things. But it's outside of the scope of what we're going to talk about today. But I think when we open it up in the end, especially when we talk about some of the homework pieces, let's revisit that, because I think that's important.
Okay.
So execution versus supervisory measures. So execution measures are things that are done by that single individual. That person does those things. So let's think of a really silly example. Let's say somebody, we manufacture push mowers. Somebody who is in charge of just affixing blades to the mower on an assembly line, that's an execution measure. I need to put on X number of blades per hour. I need to put on X number of Y number of blades per day on my production run. That's an execution measure. I do it myself, just me, nobody else. I need to execute on that measure. The other type is supervisory measures, and it doesn't mean I'm the boss. What it means is that measure we're measuring, and it's the work product of more than one person. So in our lawnmower assembly line example, that would be a supervisory measure would be how many lawnmowers did we assemble per hour, per shift, per day, whatever that happens to be.
Right.
Because it's more than just putting on the blades, it's making sure that all of the other things are in place. Another example, which I see quite a bit, it can always be hard to find measures in the accounting space, because they work on a monthly cadence, and typically we want to look at work on a weekly cadence. But that controller who's able to come up with a cash plan at the end of the week, if they have some bookkeepers underneath them, if your cash plan, that's a supervisory measure, because if you hit that and it was done, that means the people underneath you did all of their bookkeeping, they did their general ledger entries, they did all of those things, which wrap up to be able to make sure that you can do the cash plan. So that's a good example of a supervisory measure.
Right.
So we always want to know the difference between execution measures and supervisory measures. So I want us to have that concept and think about it, because as we look to advance people or elevate people throughout an organization, we're going to want to get them less on the execution measures and more on the supervisory measures. So does that concept make sense?
Yeah,
Easy
perfect.
to grasp,
Yeah.
pretty obvious. I just put fancy multisyllabic words on it, and there we go. Okay. So what are we looking for when we want to advance people? Consistency is a big piece. You can't always be expected to hit or exceed your measures every time, all the time, but we do want to have a consistent record of they're able to achieve what it is that they are expected to achieve. And you can really see that when people start seeing the measures that they're being judged against, instead of being something that they have to work, that they're aspirational, but those become table stakes. They know that they can do that, so that is who they are. That's what they're going to do. And when we see people, that's they. I was describing it qualitatively, but when they quantitatively are able to consistently hit their measures, that is a really good sign for somebody who's ready for elevation. Another is that they have measures which directly impact others. So if this person misses their measures, that's going to trickle downstream, and then other people are going to have a harder time making their measures. When you see people who are in those roles and they see that, and they can clearly see that the impact of what they do is going to affect other people inside the organization, and they are consistently hitting them, that is a really good sign. That is a mark. That is an indicator of somebody that we want to take a look at for elevation and for being able to do things. The other is we talked about execution versus supervisory. If we see people who have purely execution measures, but they're consistently hitting it and they're directly impacting it and it's very positive, maybe it's time for them to have a couple of supervisory measures as well. Maybe that is the way to begin to step in and see if we add this quarter a couple of new measures which involve more than just their output. Maybe we can begin to identify that person as somebody who is ready for elevation or for advancement. So I want to pause here again. And Ken, what are your thoughts? Do you have any questions about what we've gone through so far?
No, I mean, look, I think a lot of people will either overdo metrics or underdo them. And also not be able to differentiate what makes a difference between, as you put it, supervisory versus execution, right? So I think that's some very powerful stuff, and understanding the differences there to get what you want, right? Because that's what it's all about. Providing clarity to your employees, delegating to your employees, and laying it out on what success looks like.
Yeah, and to that point, it's really interesting because one of the pitfalls that can happen with this is, hey, look, this person has just execution measures. They're doing great. They're hitting the post, and I like them, and they're a good fit. I'm going to advance them and give them nothing but supervisory measures. Well, that doesn't always work very well. You have to begin to step them in. So one of my favorites is, you know what, we need a new sales leader. We need a director of sales. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my best salesperson and I'm going to plug them into that supervisory role. So it's no longer about their own individual measures of funnel management or proposals sent or revenue brought in per week. Now they're going to be responsible for it in aggregate over a supervisory. We've all seen that where that just doesn't work out well. So it's about stepping into it and getting into it over time. Okay, so here's one of the topics that we were talking about earlier when I was talking about qualitative versus quantitative. Reviews are very, very important.
Yeah.
And here let's start with where reviews go wrong so often. If I'm a manager and I have 5 direct reports and I see, oh, my quarterly conversations or my annual reviews are going to come up in 2 weeks, I'm going to start preparing for them. We can't help ourselves. What we do is that we very carefully craft and build out and then deliver a review, which is almost entirely based on what happened in the past 2 weeks. We just can't help ourselves. And it's called recency bias. We just will focus on that. So we can have a direct report who is mediocre, realized that review time was coming up, turned up their game, and we're so thrilled with how well they've done. They're no longer mediocre. They've popped up and they're going to get a great review. The inverse, we have somebody who is doing great. They hit a rough patch, something bad goes in their life, their performance goes down in the last 2 weeks, and the review they get, it's going to be not so good. So what we want to use is when we're reviewing people, and reviews are one of the key pieces to elevating our team members around us, elevating the people into new roles, giving them new responsibilities, giving them new authority. We've already established the review process is there, but we're going to use these measures to give us a quantitative look that we see over that complete area of time. And it's easy for us to go and do it because when we're taking those measures every week, when it comes time for a quarterly review, when it comes time for an annual review, we can look back at the whole body, the whole time, and run the analysis on that. Yes, qualitative is really important, and how they fit in with the organization and how they align with the culture of the company is all tremendously important. But those KPIs give you that quantitative, that story over time, and it doesn't lie. The numbers are what they are. So using KPIs for that quantitative aspect of a review is absolutely critical. And so if they were able to consistently hit the post, if they were able to show that they have the capacity, if they show that their metrics that they've been measured against are helping others downstream or for other members of the team or the organization, we bring that into the review process. We see it in the numbers, and we can bring that to bear. So that is a really important idea. We want to make our reviews, yes, absolutely on the emotional part, absolutely on fit and finish, absolutely on cultural alignment, but we also need to bring in that quantitative part, that absolutely measurable part into the review process, which will help us to understand who it is that we need to elevate throughout our organization. The next concept I want to bring up is the succession plan. And the one that I prefer, I call it next man up. And it's really simple. We take a look at our organization chart, and we take a look at every box, and we say, okay, if the occupant of this box is no longer there because we've elevated them, or we've exited them, or they selected themselves out and went to another opportunity, what do we do? Sometimes it's hire, but sometimes it's advance somebody else. So taking a look at that succession plan and understand how would we fill that box with the people that are already in our organization. And now we're going to go to the toughest part of next man up. And that's the box where we ourselves currently sit. Do we really want to be doing the exact job that we have, the exact role, not the exact title, but the exact role? Do we want to be doing this indefinitely? Or do we want to grow into a new role, into a new set of responsibilities, into a new balance of authority? I think that everybody, regardless of their title, regardless of their seniority, regardless of anything, wants to naturally evolve and grow. And so the box that's going to be toughest to look at is when my time when it's my time to leave this box on the org chart, what is the best plan for replacing myself? In my particular world, as a management consultant and a fractional one at that, my job is to grow an organization so that they can bring in somebody to take over my role. That's literally my champagne cork moment, is when where the company is stable enough, it's big enough, they have enough scale that I can exit out and I know it will be in good shape. So it comes a little bit more naturally for me, but I know it's very, very uncomfortable to take a look at your organization and say, who or what qualities do I want in the person who's going to take over for me?
Right.
So again, I want to pause on that, especially on the review process and on the succession planning, just to get some of your thoughts, Ken, on those things. You have
I don't think
I
most,
wouldn't say decades, because we know you're only 32, but we do know that you have some experience in some years. So what are some of your thoughts that you have on these?
yeah, I mean, quite honestly, I don't think most people consider a succession plan, and it's something that is always on the back burner if they are considering it. And then it pops up when an emergency happens. Oh, excuse me, would like a key employee leaves, and suddenly, they're trapped, right? And they've got to go find and recruit someone new, and they're stepping into that role to take over. I've got somebody that I'm working with right now. They've had two critical leaders actually quit, and it's left quite a void in the organization. So succession planning and helping people understand, what that is in that path, I think is extremely critical, that typically I think most bigger businesses do, and a lot of SMEEK type companies don't think of until it's too late.
Yeah, so 2 points on that. I couldn't agree more. 2 points on that is it can be an uncomfortable exercise, because you're thinking, when I bring up succession planning, what I get a lot of is you're bringing forward a problem that we don't have. So like, why should I be thinking about that when I have the organization, it's working, everything is fine? Why should I be thinking about that?
Right.
The corollary to that is when something happens, be it somebody leaves, or God forbid, somebody takes ill or has a family member who does, and that person is gone. They're going to pull the chute.
Right.
It is very disturbing for the rest of the organization to watch senior leadership scramble to try to figure it out. It's comforting to the organization when the senior leadership says, okay, we have the plan for this and we're beginning to execute.
Right.
And it brings some calm to the organization. Lets people know that, hey, this whole thing isn't key on a single individual, but if the unthinkable, the unthought of happens, we're ready for it.
Right.
The other part I want to go back to is just, Ken, what are some of your best practices for reviews? Mine is to really bring in those KPIs, but just to open it up a little bit more about reviews. They're so important, and they're so critical for being able to identify the people who we're going to elevate within an organization. What are some of the best practices that you employ?
I mean, I like to do it quarterly. I like to do, both the core value assessment and then KPI assessment. I also like to get feedback from, depending on the role, right? Either some of their direct reports or their peers, and sometimes even customers or people that they interact with as well. Right. And so that, and then keep them anonymous, and then go to them with clear feedback that says, hey, look, I've spoken to a couple of your clients, and, here's some of the positive things that came out. Here's some of the things that we need to work on, but have facts, I guess, for the review. And then based upon that, establish, kind of a path going forward to work on any of those deficit areas.
Yeah, I like that. I like that quite a bit, where you're getting that sort of 360 view. One of the tactics that I use is I call it the direct report diary. And you'll notice on my GCE calendar, every Friday at 9:30, I spend half an hour. And what I do is I have a row for each direct report I have, and I have a column for each Friday. And I just write a couple of sentences about how that past week was.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it so I have some, when I'm doing the review, I have some really concrete things. Hey, on the week that ended on April 21, you had such a solid week. You did this, this, and this, and that really showed how instrumental you can be. It showed alignment with our culture, or what have you, and it helps to break down that recency bias. Now,
Yeah.
when I train managers to do that, I get a lot of groaning eye roll. What do you mean I have to do this every week? Yes, you do. But that can be really helpful. So I don't want to focus too much in on the quantitative portion, but those measures are really, really important for being able to do that for
Yeah.
reviews.
Perfect.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit of homework.
Cool.
The first thing that I want everybody to do, and we talked about this last week, but is get out your org chart and look at it, update it, but really look at it, and really understand who you have in each role, and take a look at it about, you just really make sure it's up to date, and make sure that you spend some time looking through it. We all are familiar with it. Senior leaders, we've got it committed to memory, and so we can think about it and process it, no problem. But the homework is print it out, put it on a screen, whatever it happens to be, and look through it. Like, spend the time to look through it. Put the face, put the name, put the role, the accountabilities, the responsibilities, the authority, the KPIs, put all of those things in your mind when you're looking at each box. Really review that organization chart. It's a very powerful tool. The next is, for each box, I talked about a little bit, look at their measures, look at their KPIs, their weekly things, look at their OKRs, look at the things which their projects which they need to do over a month or a quarter or half a year. Take a look at them versus of their execution measures versus their supervisory measures. Like, really understand, for each role, for each person that's on that, for each box that's on your org chart, really understand those measures. Really think about them and spend some. Next, review process. Add in KPIs, add in the measures to that process. Bring in that quantitative piece, because remember, we're going to leverage two things about quantitative measures. One, we're going to defeat recency bias. We're going to take a look at the measures across the whole period of time, not just the ones that we can remember very, very clearly. The second thing is, the numbers don't lie. So we know what the target is, and you either hit them, you didn't hit them, or you exceeded them each week. And so we can begin to see the pattern. Did we start out and we exceed them by a greater amount every week? That's one piece of information. Did we sometimes meet them, sometimes not? That's another pattern. But really bringing those into the review process is really, really key. That gives you the hard data to help you make decisions that come around reviews. And the fourth part of our homework is, you have your org chart, you've worked through it. Think about not just who would take over for each role, but maybe think about it more in terms of what are the qualities that we need in each role. So if the person in this box were to be advanced to another box somewhere else, what are the qualities that I would want for a person taking that over? What are the KPIs that person will inherit, and are they ready to do them? Are the measures for that box, are they execution? Are they supervisory? Are they a bit of both? work on those sorts of things so that you may not have the person's name who would succeed into that box, but you at least know the qualities of the person that would be the best fit for that box. So the homework is really about the organization, and it's really about the measures around them, because again, we want to identify people that we can advance through our organization so that we as senior leaders can spend less and less time working for the company or the organization and more time working on it. We will derive more value to ourselves, to our investors, to our clients, our customers, to our employees, to our communities, if we can run really excellent organizations as opposed to constantly trying to work for them and to do that day-to-day work. So that's the homework. So, in closing, Ken, talking about, using measures, using KPIs, using OKRs to try to identify those people that we're going to advance through organization. What are some of the parting thoughts that you have from this?
Well, I guess, I mean, look, once you review all this stuff, I mean, it's not just reviewing and solidifying. You also have to have a process of regularly sharing it and make sure it's clear with everybody as well, right? So either through the review process or through some sort of quarterly discussion or something, right? So that direct accountability is known. And and also succession planning as well. I mean, it should not be a secret for certain levels and positions in the organization of what that looks like. So just don't be surprised that you have to repeat yourself multiple times, right? And offer, from a communications perspective, and do it often. And it's going to prevent a lot of mistakes and errors.
Yeah, you bring up a really solid point, and so I would like to just add this one piece to it. The business owner should start doing this themselves quietly and get a few reps under your belt. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. A lot of this stuff is uncomfortable.
Right.
Get comfortable with it. Be good at it yourself, and then bring it to your organization, so that you have been there, you've done that, you understand it, you're comfortable with it. Now you're able to guide your senior leaders. Once they get comfortable with it and they've done it, then they're going to be able to bring it down to the folks that are reporting up to them. So that's a really good point, Ken. If you try to take these concepts and say, hey, I saw a brilliant presentation on the shift spot. Drop your pencils, everybody. We're all going to do this. Like, it's just not going to work. So we're going to start it at the top. Make sure that the business owner, the CEO, is able to do this and get comfortable with it, and then begin to cascade it down to the organization. Yep. Probably should have put a slide on that. Excellent point, Ken. Really, that puts a fine point on it.
Awesome. Well, listen, Joshua, very insightful as usual. I really appreciate it. And how can some of the people, listening in the community, if they want to reach out, pick your brain, outside of that, what's the best way to connect with you?
The best way is through the shift spot. I'm on there, and so you can find me. You can find my profile. You can send me a message through that. That's the best way. My last name is Shale. For some reason, that's not a very common name, although it's spelled exactly the way you'd think, S-H-A-L-E. So you can find me on LinkedIn, or through GCE Strategic Consulting. But really, the shift spot is a place where I spend a lot of time, and I am always welcome. I always welcome people to reach out. I'm always willing to talk to people and to work through some things with them. I'm not going to try to sell you anything. I just love this stuff. It's funny. I have kids that are in college and heading to college, and they often comment to me, well, I study all this stuff in college, and I'm never going to use this. I actually studied all this stuff in college all the way back in the day. And I love these sorts of things. I love organizational management. And so I'm thrilled to talk with people about it and just spend some time and to help them work through. Sometimes a third-party perspective can be really helpful, and I'm glad to offer it at any time.
Have huge value. Okay, well, thank you, Joshua. I appreciate it again.
Yeah, thank you.